What happens when a podcast stops being polite about the Nuggets and starts getting real? We're going to do swipe and gripe, grill marks, and Swipe and I are going to grill each other on what we really think about the Nuggets and this season. This is Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making this part of your day, being with us Monday through Friday, being an everyday or hanging out with us through all of our great shows. We do appreciate you guys being part of our community, whether you're joining us on podcasts and giving us one of our many, many, many 5-star reviews, or if you're going to youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets and joining the 8,700 plus folks that are currently now subscribers to Locked On Nuggets as we roll towards 10,000. I want to hit, let's try and get to 9 before All-Star break, and then we can finish strong. So help us out by doing that. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network. I write a Substack called The Denver Dig, as well as Hardwood Paroxysm. I am the host of Locked On NBA Daily, as well as this show. And joining me is Swipa. You can join him on Twitter after every single Nuggets game and on his YouTube channel at SwipaCam. He has some thoughts and some takes, and we're going to get into all those today, as well as he want to know what I really think. So we're going to get into that as well. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Swipa, how are you?
You know what? I'm hanging in there. I think I got probably the most amount of Serbians upset all at once when I very much excoriated Nikola Jokic's performance in New York.
Can't do that. You can't do that if you want people to be happy with you. You can, it has to be
but
it's
funny, Matt. I don't know how many other people have more Jokic equity than me in the streets,
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
It's gonna have to happen, once every blue moon.
Doesn't matter. So we're gonna do grill marks, and so the reason I kind of brought this is I have some things I want to get Swipa's real opinion on, and because I haven't talked in a little bit because I missed last week's show, and then Swipa was when we were talking, he said, let's also do a Matt Unfiltered statement, fully honestly thoughts on the team and Malone, and I was like, okay, well, we can guide it there. So second segment is his turn. This is my turn. So Swipe, I'm going to start here. So during your takes are very strong in the moment when you're live tweeting, and that's okay. You're a fan and you're expressing how you feel about this. And I've gotten a little bit of whiplash though, because it just seems like when they're playing well, it's like Peyton Watson's, Christian Brown's a top 10 defender, and Peyton Watson's this, and Jokic is the best player in the world. And I think that you're holding them to a certain amount of standard. I would just ask you, do you think that they are closer this season to their worst or their best?
I love the way you prefaced that. And I would like to also respond to you in kind at this congressional hearing of Locked On Nuggets. I would say that this team, the reason why my stance has been what it has been on this team, when they're at their ceiling, Matt Moore, they can beat anyone and they have an argument for best team in the world. When they're at their floor, which has happened more this year than I think has happened in recent years, and they have been at their floor at least double the amount of time they have been at their ceiling, I would argue. What happens is it creates a culmination of events. And I, as somebody who comes back from a football background, that's just not something you can survive on. You have to be able to have a model of consistency. You became a Chiefs fan in 2018, so you can understand this. When the Chiefs are playing well and they're able to play well in regular season settings for the last 6 years that you've been a fan, you've watched them be able to win games, even if their offense isn't playing super well, because their defense has been able to lay a foundation and floor even when Mahomes is playing like a bottom 10 quarterback in the league. And so when you have a team that can either have Tyreek Hill and you can win with him and Travis Kelce, and then you have a quarterback who plays well that year when he had 50 touchdowns, you can set a floor that this is what we can be at our peak, or our floor can be We'll just have Patrick have a regular year and have a really good defense, and our floor will be consistency. Our floor is going to be strong closing drives in the fourth quarter. And so that's how you win games. The Nuggets, what has happened with them is they have these games where they go crazy offensively. And even like their defense will show up, like the Mavs game we saw recently. But then what happens is with the Nuggets, they will let go of the rope and they will bottom out. And I'm talking about their defense will look like something out of a horror movie versus Portland or versus the Wizards or even versus the Pelicans. And even this last game versus the Knicks. Now, again, if Jokic plays a regular game, I think they could have won that game because they had an 8-point lead with 7:11 left in the third quarter. And then they lost that quarter by 7 points, a 15-point swing with Joker on the court. Like, they oscillate between good and bad, probably more than any other contender in the NBA right now. But I think that's because their drive and their effort waxes and wanes more than the Rockets, more than Houston, more than the Thunder, more than the Celtics, even bad as they've been, and then also more than Cleveland. And those are my 5 like real contenders. I think Dallas is in there, but I think Dallas is just injuries. That's the only reason they're not in that for me right now. And I think that's where I am with them, is that they can be performing at the highest. But the issue is they will literally give you like minimal effort sometimes. And that's it. And they don't have the personnel to do that. And that's the issue.
King of Thornton, Jeff Morton's in the comments. He says the Nuggets are a mediocre team with a once-in-a-generation player. That's why it looks weird. Jeff, the only people they've lost from the championship team 2 years ago, which was considered to be the best roster in the league, are Bruce Brown and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and I guess Reggie Jackson. Like, there's no way that as much as I think that every season is a new organism, right? Like, you just can't be like they are this team, because it's like they have the important talent is still there. I refuse to be like, well, this team just isn't very good. They're not very good this year, but that phrasing is very important for getting that correct. Getting back to Swipe. Okay, so let's talk about the effort waxing and waning. Who do you put that on? Like, where is that not coming from? Is it because you have a couple of options, right? I think it's reasonable to say coach, because we tend to think of coaches as being the motivational, preparational force. It's reasonable to say the best player, because that's typically how things work in the NBA.
Yeah.
And then there's also because other forces on the roster who set a certain tone. Like, I do think that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope always plays to a certain level in terms of his effort and execution, and it doesn't really dip that much. And maybe those pieces are kind of gone, or maybe the guys like Jamal and Aaron have played to that level in the past and they're not now. Where do you put that the onus for that waxing and waning in terms of their level of performance and effort?
I appreciate that question. I will also say that, you know me, I really truly try to be as nuanced as possible, because there's never one answer for why something looks the way it does. I think it's a combination of things. What I would say is that I think unequivocally their personnel's gotten worse. And I think what's happened is, you talked about this a lot. When you're a veteran in the NBA, your IQ and knowledge of how the game works is a big aid in what helps you to be elite at something. Now, KCP and Bruce Brown, they've seen so much basketball. Even though Bruce was 25 when he got to the Nuggets, he had played through multiple playoff rounds. He had been on teams with Kevin Durant and Kyrie, so he had got a chance to learn what he needs to do. He played the point guard. He had played the 4. He just kind of knew how to oscillate his role. With KCP being gone, they don't have the defensive anchor on the perimeter that is constantly locked into his responsibility, and that sets a certain floor defensively. Could KCP at his ceiling, I think, was a first-team All-NBA guard defender. He would be terrific versus Steph Curry and Dame and others. But the thing is the Nuggets right now, they don't have elite enough personnel to rely on just athleticism or rely on just natural defensive charisma. They have players that are trying to learn how to do that. But the issue is, if you don't have the personnel, and then your best player, who is Jokic, I don't think Jokic can give maximum effort on the defensive end consistently, given what he does offensively. And I think I can back this up, and I think you'll agree with this. Steph Curry, generational offensive player. Luka Doncic, I would say it's going to be a generational offensive player. When you look at players like that have clear deficiency defensively, their teams, when they were at their best, put defensive personnel around them to be able to cover up some of those weaknesses, but also to put them in positions where they didn't have to be exposed consistently. But the other great thing about it is when they are asked to be in isolation or to defend, they have more energy to do it because they're not overcompensating for weaknesses. Jokic, because of the roster and because of the fact that Murray and Porter and Gordon even, they haven't been at the level of defense they need to be at. Jokic is getting exposed at times more and more because he just simply cannot make up for all the effort he has to put out on offense and make up for his teammates and himself at the same time. He doesn't have the physical ability to do that. So that's where I am with why the defense is so bad. It's a lack of personnel. Jokic quite literally cannot do it, and he has his own deficiency. So his deficiencies are being highlighted, but then now he has to make up for other mistakes. And so he just literally cannot do that. And I think if the personnel was better, Jokic would be better because there would be less energy he would have to give to recovery. But then on his own, he could shore up some of the things he doesn't do well. And I think that's kind of where we've kind of colluded at this point. Porter has not been good defensively, and he has to be. Murray started off really bad. I think he's gotten better, but he also hasn't been good. So this is what I'm saying. Russ is a gambler. Russ is not a technician. So he gets beat all the time. So who's supposed to defend him when he gets beat? Jokic? But that's not what Jokic does. So who's defending when there's no one else to make up for the mistakes? Because that's what KCP did. He made it for a lot of mistakes. And you could build defensive rotations around KCP's skill set. Who are you doing that with on this roster right now? And I think that's where it comes down to personnel for me.
It's all very well said. I have more questions, but we only have 30 minutes in the show. So we're going to get to my thoughts on stuff. You get to ask me questions next. I do want to note, we're going to come back to the thing about Joker and defense, because you touched on something I think that's super interesting in terms of where he's evolved to versus where he was a few years ago, where he's better than ever. But that also means you have to ask different things of him. I think that's really fascinating when you come back to that at some point. Nuggets are still 28-19 on pace for 48 wins. I need to be very clear on this because I just like this episode, and most of our episodes are just like, because there's a real palpable anxiety from the fan base when it's like, if you're the Nuggets, you're like, we're 9 games over 500 in the West. We're the 4 seed. Why are you guys, what? But it's complicated. We'll talk about my thoughts on things. We'll see what Swipe wants to ask me. We'll talk about all that next here on Locked On Nuggets. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back, guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available at TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making this part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us. Swipe and gripe, grill marks. I went through and asked Swipa some questions, and now Swipa, I think, has some stuff that he would like to hear from me. So Swipa, what do you want to know, my man?
So if you could take off, no jokes, okay? No theatrics, no soap opera, okay? Right now, if you had to grade the Denver Nuggets on the season so far, my first question is, what would be your grade? Why? And are they meeting the expectation up to the midway point that you set out for them to start the season off?
I would give them a C-. So I think that you have to acknowledge one of the things that's kind of, so I'm thinking about how there was all the talk on Twitter about the Josh Allen play, right? And about the blitz. And hey, why didn't Josh Allen make this read? He should have made this read. And then quarterbacks being like, I'm sorry, is it hard? It might be a little bit hard when you have defenders bearing down on you at full speed, trying to kill you for you to make that pass. I know it's easy on your comfy couch. The point there is that I think I always want to kind of defer to the fact that the NBA is hard, right? And I don't expect fans to do that, but I think there's an obligation as an analyst to always keep in mind, like, this stuff's extremely, extremely hard. And Joker has mentioned this like a couple of times, but isn't ever going to be pointed about it because he's just not that type of, like, he's just not, he doesn't care enough to ever make it a thing. But I feel like he's made mention of like guys that have never held a basketball or whatever, right? I have in fact held a basketball, I think once back in 1992, I held a basketball for a number of seconds. That's a joke. And so I am aware of like how hard this is, right? And so I can't give them any worse than the C-. The C- is kind of a composite of, did you do enough to improve the roster? No, you did not. The Dario Saric signing was a failure, despite it being probably a pretty good theoretical idea and the players all being pretty psyched about it. Russ was a hit, but they lost KCP and only added Russ, and that's a net negative. So you didn't make the roster better. Have they played above their heads? No, they've not. I think Christian has, in terms of like Christian's taken this step, not above his head, but Christian's played a level up. Like Christian's better than ever. I think Christian's rebalancing on defense now, and he's really kind of like, he keeps getting better week by week by week. But they have, I think the only player that's really played to his maximum potential is Joker, and maybe Christian, but like Joker for sure, based off of the incredible amount of offense that he's put in. Any sort of thing I put in on the defensive end, I mostly ascribe to just like, I'm kind of like you, where I'm like, it is what it is. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, he can't be the best player in the world because he's not better at defense. That's stupid. But I can also accurately be like, no, man, like he's getting killed on these. When he plays drop, he's getting just murdered. Like guys are getting around him for layups. Guys are shooting over him for jumpers. Guys are hitting floaters. Like, he's not providing any rotational help. Like, all these things are true, even if it's not fair to ask him of that. That's a diagnosis of what's happening. Jamal hasn't been good enough. But it's like, has Jamal been as bad as he was the first 2 months of the season? No, he's gotten better. Did he make a leap? No. Did he turn the corner and then get back to what you would hope to? No, he's still short. Like, he still would be a failing grade for this season. Aaron's been banged up every single week. And so it's hard to really judge him, but he hasn't had enough impact. Mike, I think, has been really consistent offensively. Mike, I think, has made real strides on the offensive end, but that's come at the cost of the defense. When you go up and kind of down the roster, there's nobody that you're just like, the only guy on the roster that you're able to be like, he's had a phenomenal year, I have no qualms, is Christian Brown and Joker, depending on like how much you want to put on him. Like a reasonable amount for an NBA superstar, Joker passes that by 17,000 miles. Best player in the world, he's past that like 80% of the time. 90, I would go higher than that. 95% of the time he's past that, which makes those times like the Knicks game where he doesn't live up to that equally. Like, that's why it's like, what are you doing? Because you're used to what you're seeing from him. I think they're a C-. I don't think they're a D. I don't think they're an F. They're in the 4th spot. They are 4 games behind the Rockets for 2nd. There's still a good chance they wind up with a top 3 seed. They have the best player in the world. I don't think the defense is going to get to where Ryan Blackburn thinks it's going to get, or thought it was going to get to a couple weeks ago. And so I would give them a C- ultimately for like, yeah, a pretty good season, but it could have been better if you had gotten any help from either the front office or the players' approach.
So based on performance and all that, do you place more blame for what's happened this year with the C- grade? Or if you had to allot blame, let's say by scale or percentage, how much of the blame lies on the front office? How much actually relies on the players?
You got to put coaching in there too. So I think at the very base level that Calvin Booth built a championship roster. He will always get credit for that, and he deserves that. The rest of this has been largely in uncharted waters. How do you make it work? Right? You don't have proof. Like, I think that teams can learn from Denver and Milwaukee, because Calvin went with the opposite approach of what Milwaukee did, which was, we're going to bring in Wes Matthews, and we're going to bring in Jay Crowder, and we're going to bring in these guys that are at the very end of their careers. And we're going to try and just like, if we can just squeeze out 10 minutes from them, we can do it. And it's just unsustainable. And it's very glaring when you don't have guys that give you boosts. Calvin went the other way. Julian Strother, Peyton Watson, Christian Brown. And honestly, Deron Holmes was going to be part of that equation as well. And that's like, if I were them, I'd be like, look, we spent assets to get a first rounder rookie to add to this core who's a power forward and solves a lot of our rebounding issues with the second unit, and he can't play. And that's a fair criticism. But you also have to be prepared for those kind of things to happen. Like, you just have to, and you have to adapt to it. And my biggest criticism has consistently been with the front office that they went not halfway. It was like, all right, this new CBA is a problem. How can we solve it? Maybe this. That's like a reasonable answer. Hey, maybe we can do it with young players and homegrown talent. But you have to get them on non-guaranteed contracts so that if it doesn't work, you can be like, all right, that didn't work. Let's go out and get a vet. And that's what they've resisted doing. In part because from their perspective, it's got to be, how do you really know if you don't give them time to develop? Because that was the argument about last year. How do you know what you have with Julian Strother and Peyton Watson? They didn't play. And that's fair, except for the fact that if you're asking the coaching staff to win 50 plus games in the West with standard amounts of injuries and everything else, you have to give them the tools to do so. Now, on the other end of this is just like, I don't find the team. Here's one. I don't know whether the players want something new or not, even if it's from this coaching staff, not a new coaching staff. But I don't know if they're like, we got to change up our scheme here. Like, this is not like, we just need to do something different because this is not working. I don't know if the players want that or if they're like, this is our base scheme. It's always worked. We'll be fine. Let's not mess with it. Billy Donovan in 2016 had the Thunder trying all sorts of stuff throughout the regular season, doing pick and roll stuff that they were very uncomfortable with. And everyone's like, are the Thunder like going to lose in the first round? Look at their defense. It's awful. And then it clicked for them in March and they turned it around and they were one game away from knocking off the Warriors and going back to the finals, and all of NBA history changes. That to me is like proof of sometimes it takes a while for you to try these new things and get them to work. But the players, I've also seen cases like last year with the Bucks. Adrian Griffin came in and was like, guys, you get killed every year because you run the same scheme and everyone knows it. We're going to vary this up. We got to learn how to do new things. And the players hated it. And that was a big contributing factor to Griffin getting fired. So ultimately, I think it's a very tough box where it's like, you have to just manage things. I don't know what the answer is with the CBA. I think it's probably a mix of you go halfway on young players, you go halfway on vets. You keep your options open no matter what. And that's probably the lesson to learn here.
Yeah, I think that, well, just to ask you, I guess, another follow-up question with that, then for our next segment. Currently, as it stands, you're a basketball historian. You obviously know I care about those things. Jokic is 29 this year. He'll be 30 this month, upcoming month. Is this going to, as things currently stand, if they don't make a real move by, let's say, Thursday, will this just be like the greatest offensive season by an individual player wasted because the roster around them is just simply not performing up to task? And they also are just lacking the necessary assets on said roster to be able to really deploy the scheme that would work best for how this roster is currently constructed?
We need to come up with a player to name this after. And honestly, Jokic might wind up being the guy, which would not be great. But like, I was talking to Seth Partnow about this, and as much as I criticize players like Luka who have insane usage and limited impact, there is a reasonable counter argument to the idea that the players that have the most usage on moderate efficiency do so because they have no other option. So you're stuck in this loop of they don't have anything else to go to, so they have to do everything. So they get the credit, but the team doesn't win. So they do everything trying to help the team win. It's this vicious cycle that kind of repeats over and over again. I would say that in relation to the trade market, I think there's actually the potential for them to make a big leap because of some of the pieces that are kind of coming unglued right now. I don't know whether they're in a position to get them or not because of their limited number of assets. And there is stiff competition. They got to sneak in and grab one of these when another deal falls apart. They got to hope that they're the team that everybody's like, they got him for that. They got to hope to be that team next week. I don't think the front office feels the pressure to do something. I don't feel the front office feels like they're in mortal danger if they don't do something. I don't think that they feel the same pressure that I think the fan base does to do something. And I do think at the end of the day, I don't blame them because I continue to look at this Western Conference and I'm like, who are you scared of in a series versus Denver with Jokic? Who are you scared of? Go up and down and tell me the team that you're just like, there's no way we can beat.
Do you think that's what Cleveland did with LeBron?
Which time?
So 07, no. 07 was the proof of the guy.
Yeah.
But by the time they got to 10, or we'll say 9, but 10 in particular, they lose to the Orlando team that everybody, including Cleveland, if you ask the ownership, they were we were going to beat this team. Like, no question. LeBron just had one of the greatest seasons of all time. He's the best player in the world, either him or Kobe at that point. And they just believed that Galkis, like all the players on that roster, were going to be a rise to the occasion. But then what happened? They ran into a Dwight Howard, who basically shut the entire paint down. And then Haydu Turkoglu, Rashard Lewis, and the rest of that roster, and Jameer Nelson. I mean, they just put a team out, and that team beat a 35 points per game LeBron James in the Eastern Conference Final. Do you kind of think that is the front office and ownership, or are they kind of lost in that place of stability because they're just like, we have Jokic, and so that should beat everything else?
I would agree. I think the other thing though here is like you got to be careful about it, because one of the things that Cleveland team does, they stocked up to beat Boston, and Boston stocked up to beat Cleveland, and then Orlando was the team that had solves for both of those concepts, and the other one had never saw them coming. And look, I'm not saying that here's the thing. If I'm like, who are you scared of in the West? Who in the West is scared of Denver? Who in the West is really like, man, we can't beat Joker? Who in the West is like, oh no, Jamal Murray, right? 2 years ago, yeah.
But why do you? But here's the thing. Now I think that's a follow-up question. Why do you think that is? Because everybody acknowledges Joker is the best in the world, but there's something empirically true about this team that teams just do not fear the Nuggets around Joker at all. What is that?
I think it's that you always believe in your defense, that you can figure like, yeah, it's going to be tough. Yeah, Joker's going to be amazing. He's going to, because this is the thing is, okay, Joker's better than every other superstar, but all these superstars are great. They're all going to have really, really great games. Shea's going to have awesome games in the playoffs. You're going to have to live with that. You're going to lose some series games because Shea's amazing. Luka, you're going to lose some games even though Luka's amazing, unless you're the Celtics. The Clippers, you're going to lose some games because Kawhi just pulls them there. You're going to lose a couple of Lakers games. You should. Maybe the Nuggets won't because they've had their number. But with the things I hear about the Lakers, which we'll get to in a second, they might have more weapons this year. And that changes the equation. You're always going to believe that you can come up with those as long as you're not like, man, their defense just shut us down. And nobody's going to say that about Denver. Like, Denver had defensive answers, honestly, the last 2 seasons. And they have fewer of them this year because they let KCP walk. And that's the reality. All right, this has been fun. We will do this again. I like this format. We should do this again next week. We do need to get to some news, though, because I want to talk about Bogdanovic and the chances of Denver adding him. And if not the Nuggets, what if another West team gets Bogey? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Nuggets. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app's super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's just the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us. So Bogdanovic is the name that's kind of has entered the chat, right? There's been reports of a number of teams. I checked in this morning. I will tell you what I've heard on Bogdanovic. 5 to 6 teams have registered significant interest. I do not know if Denver is one of them. I would assume. The latest, though, this morning is the Los Angeles Lakers, that they have substantive interest in Bogdanovic and could look to add him. Bogey's 32, and I think that matters. He has great chemistry and relationship with his countryman, Nikola Jokic. I think that matters. I do think, look, I've said this kind of from the beginning. The one deal that makes the most sense to me is Michael Porter Jr. to the Hawks if the Hawks are willing to send multiple rotational players. They have a lot of different things that they can do here. They can be like, hey, do you want Clint Capella's $10 million expiring? Hey, do you want Onyeka Okongwu, who's on a multi-year extension and is a young stretch 5 power forward that you can combo with, who's got a lot of versatility? Hey, we're willing to talk about DeAndre Hunter, even though he's maybe the sixth man of the year. They've got Bogdanovic. It gives you another playmaker on ball. And with Jalen Johnson going down, they're now incentive to kind of relook at this roster and maybe start looking at their moves to clear whatever decks they want to clear to make the ultimate changes they want this summer, because they know they're going to be building around Jalen Johnson and Dyson Daniels, and Trae Young is a question mark. So my question for you is, how much does the idea of Bogdanovic intrigue you? And how much would it suck if he winds up on the Lakers?
Oh, man, the answer to the second one, it wouldn't. Not. I mean, it's not that it wouldn't, but I like Bogey. I've always liked Bogey, but Bogey would also, I don't think he would make a meaningful change in that series, at least with me. Their offense with the Lakers hasn't really ever been the issue. It's just been the fact that they can't guard Denver in the ways that are important. And I think in the first one, I would like Bogey on the roster with Jokic and with Murray and with Russ in particular, because I think he would add like another ball handler, floor spacer. And, he'll compete on defense. That's what I'll say about Bogey. Like, he's not just going to die like on screens, like, and just not try, but he's also just not like a preeminent defender. But now here's the thing. If I countered your question with another half question, and I said I got DeAndre Hunter back, so I get a positive wing defender that's just better at all of those things on defense than Michael Porter is, just for many different reasons. I think he's been a positive shooter this year. I think he started off really hot, kind of cooled down a little bit as of late. But if you had him in the roster, you would have Brown, Hunter, Gordon, Watson, and then you would have Russell. You would have basically 5 competent defenders you could really build a scheme around within your rotation. And then you would have another shooter in Bogey with Murray on the roster as well. How would you feel about if the Nuggets acquired Hunter and Bogey and then got off of Porter, Zeke because of the money, but then they had to give up like the 31 first or whatever else? Do you feel like that would change the direction for the immediacy of the team this year?
One, I don't know if Hunter's still on the board.
Yeah.
He was on the board for a while. I think that there's possible, like, I haven't heard anything about him in a while. I think they may have cooled on moving him.
Mm-hmm.
2, if you're talking about based off of the competition that there is for these guys, the problem is that it's not, you just send MPJ and Zeke and the 2031 first. It's you're sending Zeke, MPJ, the 2031 first, and 2 swaps. Like, that's what you're doing here, is you're moving the swaps, which could be dangerous. Like, that's a dangerous thing to do with where this roster is at. Let me try and contextualize this. I have no reason to think this will ever happen because he's been literally the most available superstar I've ever seen. He is a tank. He is unstoppable. Okay. And certainly would never this would be horrible in so many ways. What did they have a Tim Duncan year, like 97, where Joker's out?
You don't have access to the picks anyway.
No, but they get to keep them, right? They can't trade them, but they get to keep them, the ones that are not swapped. So the swaps are coming in the non-tradable years. And so that's the thing. What if you wind up giving up a top 5 pick in one of those? Like, you could be like, I'm willing to take that risk. That's totally fine. I'm just saying that's something to consider here, is that you don't know what 2020, you don't know what the 2028 swap's going to look like. And you're like, yeah, but I know what this year looks like. And I know that we can win a title with Hunter and Bogdanovic.
Well, the only comparison to Jokic for 15, so if, for instance, that would be a 12, 13, 14-year run of, and 10 of those would damn near be first team All-NBA to MVP level years, right? The only comparison to that would be LeBron, because Jordan started in 87 winning MVPs, but Jordan by 94 retired, and then he came back a year and a half later. So outside of LeBron, like in terms of just winning MVPs and running through, maybe Wilt. So yeah, I mean, Jokic would be an anomaly of like 4 other players ever, if that. So yeah, I mean, it's not likely that he'll be able to do that. But that's the thing, though. It's like, sure, you can play that if game, but Matt, they've already mismanaged so many assets on this team in so many different ways that it's like,
and that to me, that's like and look, there's no awareness of it. I will just tell you from the conversations I've had, like the word assets has come up like 700,000 times.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing is like, it's not even necessarily about like, we need X player. Like that's how fans think, is like, we need Y player. Like we need a dog on the wing, or we need a high level, we need an all-star next to Joker. And like the front office is just like, we need to be able to have options, because we have none right now. And I'm
but excuse me, to ask you a follow-up question. Who's the one that delineated those?
Yeah, I was just about to say, it's the hot dog meme. It's the hot dog man meme. We're all trying to find the guy that did this.
Right.
You know, because like, look, it would be easier if it was like, yeah, we'll trade you Justin Holiday and whatever. Yeah, we'll give you this veteran big man. Like, do you know, like the price for veteran big man is once again going to be stupidly high this year. You know, like there's a reason Valanciunas, like the Wizards went out in free agency and gave a man $10 million specifically so that they could trade him right now, because everybody needs a backup center. You know, they had no intentions of winning. They knew what this was going to be like. They knew JV wasn't going to play well. It's just, hey, we're going to pay this guy to be around, to teach the young guys for half a year, and then we're going to flip him out because we know everybody's going to need him and we have the cap space to do so.
But then Booth did do that with Sarge. So what I would say is it's a culmination of miscalculations. Would you think that phrasing would work for Calvin Booth? It's a culmination of, you made a miscalculation on a young roster by saying we're going to have five rookie contracts on the roster, not including Holmes, with Hunter Tyson and Pickett in the other 3. And then you're going to trade out assets. You're going to give Reggie Jackson a 1-for-1. And then to get off that 1-for-1, you trade 3 second-round picks. And then coupled with that, so you have 5 rookie contracts, and then you get a veteran on the roster. Apparently sounds like it made some promises behind the scenes to get that player onto the roster in 23. And then you give them a 1-for-1, and then you sign Russ for a 1-for-1, which is work. And then you sign Dario for a 1-for-1. For me, for no reason. So that's like a negotiation thing, is that if I'm going to get you here for 5.3, you don't have any other deals for $5 million out there, but I'm going to give you an additional player option on a year in which you need that money and that asset. And again, I want to be clear here. They got rid of KCP to have the option to sign Sarge. And you made a miscalculation of how to utilize that money, and now the money's sitting on your bench.
Okay, so I want two things here. We're going to go long, I don't care. So we're already late. So 2 things here. One, you can disagree with this approach. I'm just trying to add context. And again, I haven't checked it. Like, this isn't confirmed by the front office. This is me looking around. One thing I do know is that front offices typically have a standard approach with agents about what they're going to offer. So some teams are like, we don't do player options. Like, that's just, as a program, we don't do that. We'll sign you for the amount of years. And if you want a player option on the end of it, we'll just offer you 1 year less and you can enter free agency. And some teams are like, we only sign team options. Like, that's what we do. Like, you notice, like, that's becoming very popular now, is like a lot of team options. Like, that's one of the reasons the Rockets constructed their team the way that they did, with team options. And so if Denver's entire thing is like, we provide player options as an incentive to come here. If it's like, well, that guy got his guy as a player option, I want my guy to get a player option. And if you're like, well, that's the trick of negotiating, that's fine. I'm just saying that it's pretty standard for these things to happen. And the Nuggets are far from the only team that offers player options pretty freely. You're not wrong that it's restrictive. I think the other question I would have for you is, you had the worst, you were as far against, I'm trying to validate you here. You had the worst consensus opinion of the Saric edition of anybody in the Nuggets online landscape. Okay. And you've been proven correct. You were like, this has worked out the way that you feared that it would. How far below where you thought it would be has this gone? Did you think he would be this bad?
No, my concession was always for Jokic. You don't need another unathletic, non-defensive big on your roster. It doesn't make sense. And then not only did I think that was the issue, it was like, your issue is finding minutes for Jokic in the regular season, and then come playoffs, do you have another option? Because again, Calvin Booth himself brought up having versatility. You tell me, Matt, based on what you saw from Sarge, not 21 with the Suns, 23, 24 with the Warriors, what versatility would he offer in a half-court playoff setting?
So
Based on the post-ACL Sarge, not based on pre.
I hear you. So I would actually, here's what I would argue is if you watch the Warriors first half of last year, the bench unit was really great, and Saric was a huge component of that.
CP3 made that.
Yes. It was. Here's the thing: it was CP3 with Dario and Pods, right? Mm-hmm. It was like that combo of the young guys, and they were honestly carrying. If you go back, Steph and Draymond had negative on-court net rating.
Yeah, I know. The bench was the reason why they were winning. Yeah,
right. And you're gonna say it was Chris, and it was, but Dario was helpful in that, like he was not a negative. Like I'm not even talking about the numbers. Like watching them, Dario was that kind of versatile player. Now, what happened in the back half of the year, because Warriors fans turned on him, is when they moved guys in, when they broke up that lineup to fix the starters. That's when it fell apart. Dario wasn't able to hold the floor up unless the conditions were right. And that, I think, was maybe the miscalculation, because I do think that Dario was helpful with the right combinations for the Warriors last year. He wasn't universally terrible the entire season.
But I think that's the thing, though. You're trying to add to this locker room, and this is what KYP. You probably love that phrase. Know your personnel.
I do.
The Nuggets, Dario does not fit what your personnel needs. And again, if you're looking for something to floor raise, this. But again, you've heard me say this for a time now. The Nuggets got true to self, Matt. They got truly great. Not when they focused on the backup 4 or 5 spot. It's when they realized that what does Joker most need? How do you maximize Joker and Jamal? Give them an additional defender to do the hard, gritty stuff that's willing to do the smart things on offense, and that player can play with and amplify what the best players are doing with Jokic. Yeah. And that's what Brown was, what KCP was. And I told you in the summer, I thought Chris Dunn and I thought Nikhil were both those options. And I have been proven right. You see Chris Dunn.
You have been.
It's been freaking amazing next to James Harden.
He's been great. Yep.
But that's what I'm saying. In the NBA, the strategy should be, how do I make my best player the best version of themselves? Dario doesn't answer those questions at all.
I think a killer. Well, he was never meant to. He was really just meant to augment the regular season bench minutes. He was meant to play the DeAndre role. I don't think he was intended to be a player that.
But again, I think to your point, though, you have to what you then have to do to the real point, it's offset the Dario with a Chris Paul. Like there has to be the floor raiser at the point guard spot.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
The other thing I think here is. So one of the things that I was really shocked by is like they didn't have like these. They didn't lose KCP by a nail. It wasn't like they lost KCP at the last second. We went back and forth and they came over the top of us. Like they didn't
I know. That's what I'm telling you. It's the craziest thing.
But that was based off of like they made an assessment, right? Like you don't need to go back and forth. You don't need to be involved in this kind of negotiation. You're wasting your time if you're like, I don't want to sign him because I believe in Christian Brown. And again, Christian, I've said it a million times and I'll say it again. Christian's a better ISO defender than KCP at this point in his career. And Christian is more athletic and Christian's way better in transition. Like he is a monster this season in finishing. He's so good. And it was such a concern for me. And he's been so much better at that stuff than I thought. However, I do think that one of the things that they really got caught up in was believing like, oh, KCP just plays this role. And if I just replace him with Christian Brown, Christian's close enough and it'll all be the same. And what we've seen instead is there's defending your guy and there's defending teams.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing now is when MPJ, Jamal, and Joker as a trio were not this easily slice and diceable, easily compromisable defensive structure because of Aaron and KCP. Or if you needed to, you could go to Aaron and Christian because sometimes they are pretty good, right? Second halves, clutch time. There's certain environments where they're really good together. But that combination, I think, is what they kind of missed out on, was like the floor dropped out of that trio.
Follow-up question then, Matt. Who cares about the length? I'm being dead with you. Locked On. This is a great show. There's 346 people in here, and they're going to be 12,000 people watching the show probably by the end of it. Matter of fact, we could probably get to 9,000 subscribers off this episode alone because of how good it's been so far. Matt, this is what I'm saying about know your personnel.
Yeah.
The Warriors didn't make those mistakes with Steph when he was in his prime. Now, but this is why. This is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about post whatever. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, again, 2020, 21 happened because of injuries. They were decimated by injuries 2021. Steph was like crazy. But what happened is they rebranded 21-22. They added the Jordan Poole draft in the first round. They then got Gary Payton the second. They had Andrew Wiggins on the roster. They traded him out, obviously, for the D'Angelo Russell deal. They put players around him and said, we believe you can floor raise enough with the offense while you're on the court, and all we got to do, even if it's not going to be a traditional standard and you're going to get into the playoff setting and you might find you're going to have issues with the secondary score, you're not going to be able to attack us because we're going to have Draymond, Wiggs, Looney, and whoever else, and Gary Payton II, whoever, on the court at all times, at least two of them with Clay. And you're going to have to beat us by attacking the best half-court set defense in the sport. That's what I'm saying. Is 100%. I get that. I understand that, but it's a utilization of how you're visualizing the roster. So if you were able to build a roster with Joker where you just could not take advantage of them every single possession on the defensive end, Matt, that's what I'm thinking. That's where the win would be. That's why I think slanting your teams defensively, if you look in the last several years, like I said, with the Mavericks and Warriors alone, and even with the Bucks in 21, that has been the formula, and it was the formula for Denver. You got all-time floor raising with this offensive giant, but then you give them a defensive floor that allows it to where we're going to stop you for every two possessions that we score, and then now we're building a lead throughout the game, let alone in the clutch. And that's what I'm saying. Where did that go? I think that's where the vision got lost, just from my opinion.
It's been good. This has been really good. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Extra long episode today. We will be back with a post-game show tonight after the Sixers game. We'll get you wrapped up on how that goes. No Joel Embiid tonight, or Paul George, who's also hurt. So we'll get you a wrap up on how that game should be tough, though. Sixers are playing really well right now. Tyrese Maxey is a beast. We'll see how this one turns out, and then we'll have game recaps for you over the weekend. Swipe and Gripe returns next Friday. We'll do No Jinx on Sunday night live around between 10:30 and 11 Mountain Time. Hope you guys have a great weekend. We'll see you guys again next time here on Locked On Nuggets.